Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. Let me start from the beginning because context matters here. I bought my Camaro back in 2018 when I was single and working my first real job out of college. Found it in a barn about 2 hours outside the city, completely rusted out and missing half its engine parts. The old farmer who owned it wanted $3,000 for what basically amounted to a rolling shell, but something about that car spoke to me. Maybe it was the original paint job peeking through decades of rust, or maybe I was just young and stupid enough to think I could actually restore the thing. Either way, I bought it with money from my grandmother's inheritance and spent the next 4 years of my life learning everything there was to know about classic muscle cars. YouTube became my best friend, along with every automotive forum on the internet. I taught myself how to rebuild engines, how to do bodywork, how to rewire electrical systems from scratch. Weekends disappeared into that garage, along with most of my disposable income for parts, tools, and about 6 different paint jobs until I got it right. When I met my wife in 2020, the car was maybe 60% done. She thought it was cool that I had a project, something I was passionate about. Her parents, however, had different opinions right from the start. My mother-in-law made her thoughts clear during our second meeting. She walked into my garage uninvited while I was under the hood adjusting the carburetor and announced that the car was too loud and took up too much space. This was before we were even engaged, mind you. She suggested I should sell it and use the money for something more practical, like a down payment on a house. When I politely explained that the car wasn't for sale, she got this look on her face that I'd come to know very well over the next few years. The real warning sign should have been what happened about 6 months later. I came home from work to find my mother-in-law in my garage with a bucket of soapy water and a scouring pad, scrubbing away at my freshly painted quarter panel. She'd already managed to scratch through the clear coat in several places before I caught her. When I asked what she was doing, she said the car looked dirty and she was just trying to help clean it up. I spent that weekend sanding and repainting the entire panel. That's when I installed my first security camera in the garage. My father-in-law wasn't much better. He had this habit of walking around the car whenever he visited, pointing out everything he thought was wrong with it. The exhaust was too loud for the neighborhood, the color was too flashy, the interior was impractical for hauling groceries. He'd stand there shaking his head like I was some kind of delinquent for owning something that actually brought me joy. But the real issue became clear after my wife and I got married and bought our house together. Suddenly, my car wasn't just my hobby anymore. According to her parents, anything in our shared garage was community property, and they had opinions about how that space should be used. The complaints started small. My mother-in-law would mention during dinner that the garage would make such a nice playroom for future grandchildren. My father-in-law would wonder aloud why we needed such a big garage if we were only storing one practical car in it. They never said I should get rid of the Camaro outright, but the implications were always there, hanging in the air like smoke. My wife tried to stay neutral, but I could see the pressure they were putting on her. They had this way of making their wants sound like reasonable suggestions, like they were just looking out for our best interests. Why did we need such an expensive toy when we could be saving for the future? Wouldn't it be nice to have that extra space for when guests visited? Didn't I think it was a little selfish to spend so much time and money on something that only I enjoyed? The thing is, by 2022, the car wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a legitimate investment. I'd put about $35,000 into the restoration over 4 years, not counting my labor. And a similar car in that condition was worth somewhere between $55,000 and $70,000 on the current market. This wasn't some weekend toy anymore. It was a serious piece of American automotive history that I'd brought back from the dead with my own hands. I tried explaining this to my in-laws, but they just saw dollar signs. To them, the car represented money sitting in the garage doing nothing, money that could be put to better use on more practical things. The fact that I actually drove it, that I took it to car shows on weekends, that working on it was how I relaxed after stressful days at the office, none of that mattered to them. Things escalated slowly over the next couple of years. My mother-in-law started making comments about how the car attracted the wrong kind of attention to our neighborhood. My father-in-law began telling people at family gatherings that I was having some kind of midlife crisis even though I was barely 30. They'd bring up the car whenever money was tight, suggesting we could solve our problems by just getting rid of the unnecessary expense. The breaking point came last month when I had to travel for work. Nothing major, just a 3-day training conference in another state that I couldn't get out of. I'd done business trips before without any issues, so I didn't think twice about leaving town for a few days. I should have known something was wrong when my wife seemed nervous about me leaving. She kept asking if I was sure I had to go, if there wasn't some way to do the training remotely. When I asked what was bothering her, she said her parents had been asking a lot of questions about my schedule lately, but she didn't know why. I figured they were just being their usual nosy selves and didn't think much of it. The conference was in Chicago, and I flew out on a Tuesday morning. The plan was to be back Friday evening, maybe Saturday morning if my flight got delayed, standard business trip stuff. I texted my wife when I landed, called her that evening, everything seemed normal. Wednesday and Thursday went fine. The training was actually pretty useful, and I was looking forward to getting home and maybe taking the Camaro out for a drive over the weekend. The weather was supposed to be perfect, and I'd been wanting to test out some carburetor adjustments I'd made the week before. Friday afternoon, my flight landed right on schedule. I grabbed my luggage, caught an Uber home, and pulled into my driveway around 6:30. The first thing I noticed was that both garage doors were closed, which was unusual because my wife typically left hers open when she was home. But I figured maybe she'd gone out for groceries or something. I punched in the code to open my side of the garage and stood there staring at an empty space where my car should have been. For a moment, I thought maybe I was confused. Maybe I'd parked it somewhere else before leaving for the airport. But no, I distinctly remembered backing it into the garage Tuesday morning after warming it up, just like I always did. The oil stain on the concrete floor was still there, along with my workbench and tool chest exactly where I'd left them. My first thought was that someone had broken into the garage, but there was no sign of forced entry. The overhead door was intact, the side door was locked from the inside, and all my tools were still there. A professional thief wouldn't leave thousands of dollars worth of equipment behind but steal the car. Then I noticed something else. My security camera, the one I'd installed specifically to watch the car, had a piece of duct tape carefully placed over the lens. That's when I knew this wasn't a random theft. I pulled out my phone and called my wife immediately. She answered on the first ring, which told me she'd been expecting my call. "Hey honey, how was your flight?" she said, but her voice sounded strained, like she was trying too hard to sound normal. "Where's my car?" I asked. There was silence on the other end for about 10 seconds. Then she started crying. "I'm so sorry," she said between sobs. "I tried to stop them, I really did, but they said they were just going to move it, and then when I got home from work yesterday it was gone, and they said they'd already made arrangements and I didn't know what to do." "Who made arrangements?" "What are you talking about?" "My parents," she said. "They used the spare key from the emergency hook. They said they found someone who would actually appreciate the car and that we could use the money for something more important." I felt my blood pressure spike. "They sold my car?" "They said it was a good deal," she continued, still crying. "They put the deposit toward a down payment on an SUV they picked out for us. They said it was time for us to be more practical and start thinking about starting a family." I was standing in my empty garage, staring at the oil stain where my car used to be, listening to my wife tell me that her parents had stolen and sold the most valuable thing I owned to buy me a replacement vehicle I'd never asked for. "Where are they now?" I asked. "They went to dinner to celebrate," she said. "They wanted to surprise you when you got back." I hung up and immediately called my mother-in-law. She answered cheerfully like nothing unusual had happened. "Oh, you're back," she said. "We have such wonderful news for you." "Where is my car?" I asked. "Now, before you get upset, let me explain," she said, and I could hear the smugness in her voice. "We found a lovely gentleman who collects classic cars, and he made us an excellent offer. We've already put the money down on a beautiful SUV that will be much more practical for you and our daughter. You're going to love it once you see how much more space it has. You stole my car." "We did not steal anything," she said, getting defensive. "We did you a favor. That car was just sitting in the garage collecting dust, and now you'll have something you can actually use. The gentleman we sold it to is going to restore it properly and actually drive it instead of just looking at it." This was the moment I realized I wasn't dealing with family drama anymore. This was criminal behavior, and I needed to treat it accordingly. "Did you forge my signature on the title?" I asked. There was a pause. "Your father-in-law handled all the paperwork. Everything is completely legal and above board." "I never signed anything. You can't legally sell someone else's car without their permission." "Well, you're married to our daughter," she said. Like that explained everything. "What's yours is ours, and we decided this was best for everyone." That's when I knew I was dealing with people who had completely lost touch with reality. They genuinely believed that marrying their daughter gave them ownership rights to my property. They thought they could steal my car, forge my signature, and I'd just go along with it because we were family. "Where's my car right now?" I asked one more time. "It's with its new owner," she said. "A very nice man who runs a small car lot just outside town. He's going to take good care of it." "What's the name of the lot?" She hesitated. "I don't think we should give you that information right now. You're clearly upset, and we don't want you doing something you'll regret. Why don't you sleep on it, and we can all sit down tomorrow and discuss this like adults?" I hung up and called the police. The dispatcher asked if this was an emergency, and I told her I needed to report a stolen vehicle. She transferred me to someone who could take the details, and I explained the situation as calmly as I could. My in-laws had taken my car without permission while I was out of town and sold it to a third party. Yes, I had the title and registration in my name. No, I had not given them permission to sell it. Yes, I wanted to press charges. The officer who took my call seemed skeptical at first. Family disputes over property were complicated, and he wanted to make sure I wasn't just trying to use the police to settle a civil matter. But when I explained that they'd forged my signature and sold my car to a dealer, his tone changed. That wasn't a family dispute anymore. That was felony fraud. He told me a unit would be dispatched to take my statement, and that I should gather all my documentation proving ownership of the vehicle, title, registration, insurance papers, anything that established the car was legally mine. While I waited for the police, I called my wife back. She was still crying, but now she was angry too. "You called the cops on my parents?" she demanded. "Your parents stole my car and sold it," I said. "That's a felony. What did you expect me to do?" "I expected you to talk to them first. Their family. They had their chance to talk. Your mother just told me she won't even tell me where my car is because she doesn't want me doing something I'll regret. They think they can steal from me and I'll just accept it because we're related by marriage." "They were trying to help us." "They were trying to control us," I corrected. "And they committed multiple felonies doing it. Grand theft auto, fraud, probably forgery depending on how they handled the paperwork. I'm not losing $60,000 because your parents think they know better than I do about my own property." She started crying again. "What am I supposed to do? They're my parents." "That's your decision," I said. "But I'm not dropping the charges. They crossed a line and there have to be consequences." The police arrived about 20 minutes later. Officer Martinez was a middle-aged guy who looked like he'd seen everything at least twice. He was polite but professional, taking notes while I explained the situation. "Do you have the title?" he asked. I showed him the original title, which was in my name only. My wife wasn't on it because I'd owned the car before we got married, and we'd never bothered to add her name since she didn't drive it. "Any witnesses to the theft?" "My security camera recorded them taking it, but they covered the lens afterward. The footage should show them entering the garage with the key." "And they admitted to selling it?" "Over the phone, about an hour ago. My mother-in-law told me they found a buyer and already put money down on a replacement vehicle." Officer Martinez shook his head. "Family or not, you can't just take someone's car and sell it. Do you know where the vehicle is now?" "Some kind of car lot outside town. My mother-in-law wouldn't give me the name, but she said they sold it to someone who runs a small dealership." "We'll track it down," he said. "These things usually aren't too hard to find. How much is the vehicle worth?" "I have about $35,000 in restoration costs documented, and similar cars in this condition sell for $55,000 to $70,000 depending on the buyer." His eyebrows went up. "So we're talking grand theft auto, not just a misdemeanor?" "Yes, sir." "And you want to press charges against your in-laws?" I looked back at my empty garage, thought about the 4 years of work they'd just given away to some stranger, and nodded. "Absolutely." Officer Martinez finished taking my statement and assured me they'd begin investigating immediately. He said cases like this were usually pretty straightforward because the perpetrators rarely tried to cover their tracks very well. When people think they're in the right, they tend to leave obvious evidence behind. After he left, I sat in my garage for a while, trying to process what had just happened. 4 years of weekends, $35,000, countless hours of research and learning, all gone because my in-laws decided they knew better than I did about my own life. My wife came home around 9:30 looking like she'd been crying for hours. We didn't talk much that evening. What was there to say? Her parents had committed felonies against me, and she was asking me to just let it slide because family was more important than justice. The next morning, Saturday, I got a call from Officer Martinez. They'd located my car at a small, used car lot about 20 minutes outside town. The owner claimed he'd bought it legitimately and had paperwork to prove it. They were arranging to meet at the lot that afternoon to sort everything out. "Are you available to come down and identify the vehicle?" he asked. "Absolutely." "Bring your title and any other documentation you have. And you might want to bring your in-laws too, since they'll need to explain how they had the authority to sell a car they didn't own." I called my wife and told her what was happening. She said she'd contact her parents and meet us at the lot. I could tell she was hoping this would all work out somehow, that maybe there had been some kind of misunderstanding that could be cleared up without anyone going to jail. I knew better. I'd heard the smugness in my mother-in-law's voice the night before. She genuinely believed she'd done the right thing, and she wasn't going to back down just because the police got involved. In her mind, I was the one being unreasonable. The car lot was exactly what I'd expected. A small operation with maybe 30 vehicles spread across a gravel lot, most of them older domestic cars and trucks that had seen better days. There was a small office building that looked like it had been a fast food restaurant in a previous life, complete with a drive-through window that now displayed hand-painted signs advertising financing options. I spotted my Camaro immediately. It was parked right up front, obviously being showcased as one of the lot's premium vehicles. Someone had put a price sticker on the windshield reading $28,900, which made my blood boil. They were trying to flip my $60,000 car for less than half its actual value. Officer Martinez was already there when I arrived, along with another officer I didn't recognize. The lot owner, a sweaty guy in his 50s wearing a stained polo shirt, was standing next to my car looking increasingly nervous. My wife pulled up a few minutes later with her parents in tow. My mother-in-law got out of the car with a folder in her hand, looking like she was ready to give a presentation. My father-in-law looked confused, like he couldn't figure out why the police were involved in what he considered a simple family transaction. "That's my car," I told Officer Martinez, pointing to the Camaro. The lot owner, whose name turned out to be Jerry, immediately started protesting. "Now hold on a minute," he said. "I bought that car fair and square. I've got all the paperwork right here." He produced a bill of sale and what looked like a photocopy of a vehicle title. Officer Martinez examined both documents carefully. "This appears to be a copy of a registration, not a title," he said to Jerry, "and the signature doesn't look right." That's when my mother-in-law stepped forward with her folder. "Officer, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said in her most condescending tone. "We are the legal guardians of this vehicle, and we had every right to sell it." "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see some documentation proving that," Officer Martinez replied. She opened her folder and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a printout of some kind of family values article she'd found online, along with what appeared to be a homemade document declaring herself and her husband as family financial advisors for their daughter's household. Officer Martinez looked at the papers, then looked at my mother-in-law like she'd lost her mind. "Ma'am, this isn't legal documentation. You can't just declare yourself the guardian of someone else's property." "But they're married to our daughter," my father-in-law protested. "What's theirs is ours." "That's not how property law works, sir," the officer explained patiently. "Marriage doesn't give the in-laws ownership rights to personal property that predates the marriage." I pulled out my title, the original document with my name clearly printed as the sole owner, along with my registration and insurance papers. Officer Martinez compared my documents to the fake paperwork Jerry had been given. "Sir, you've been sold a stolen vehicle," he told Jerry. "These people had no legal authority to sell this car." Jerry's face went white. "But they said they were the owners. They said the guy who owned it had died and they were handling his estate." That was news to me. I looked at my in-laws, who suddenly seemed to realize they were in real trouble. "We never said anyone was dead," my mother-in-law protested weakly. "You absolutely did," Jerry shot back. "You told me your son-in-law had passed away unexpectedly and you needed to liquidate his assets quickly. That's the only reason I gave you cash instead of doing a proper title transfer." Officer Martinez looked at my in-laws with a mixture of disgust and disbelief. "So you told this man that your son-in-law was deceased in order to sell his car?" My father-in-law started to say something, but Officer Martinez held up his hand. "You have the right to remain silent," he began, and my in-laws' faces went from confused to terrified as he continued reading them their rights. Jerry immediately started cooperating, turning over all the fake paperwork and explaining how the transaction had taken place. He'd paid my in-laws $15,000 in cash, well below market value because they'd claimed they needed to sell quickly due to estate complications. He'd planned to invest another $10,000 in minor repairs and detailing before listing it for his asking price. "I run a legitimate business," he kept saying. I had no idea they were lying about owning the car. My mother-in-law actually tried to argue with the officer as he put the handcuffs on her. She pulled out her phone and started reading from what appeared to be a family blog about tough love parenting and why children needed guidance from their elders even after marriage. "Officer, you don't understand," she said. "We were trying to help them make better financial decisions. Young people today don't understand the value of money, and sometimes parents have to step in and provide guidance." "Ma'am, providing guidance doesn't include stealing and selling someone else's car," Officer Martinez replied. "You've committed grand theft auto, fraud, and apparently gave false information to the buyer about the owner being deceased. These are serious felonies." My father-in-law seemed to finally grasp the situation. "But we're family," he said. "Surely this can all be worked out without involving the courts." "That was an option yesterday," I said. "Before you told someone I was dead and sold my car to a stranger for $15,000. My wife was crying again, begging me to drop the charges. She kept saying this would ruin her parents' lives, that they were good people who just made a mistake. But I'd heard Jerry's testimony. This wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. They'd actively deceived him about my death to make the sale go through. The officers loaded my in-laws into the back of their patrol cars while Jerry signed paperwork turning my car back over to me. I did a quick inspection and found a few small scratches on the bumper where someone had tried to buff out some imaginary imperfections, but otherwise it was exactly as I'd left it. "I'm really sorry about this," Jerry said as he handed me the keys. "I thought I was buying from legitimate sellers. I never would have gotten involved if I'd known they didn't own the car." "I believe you," I told him. "But next time someone wants to sell you a $60,000 car for 15 grand, maybe ask a few more questions." He nodded sheepishly. "This is going to cost me my dealer's license, isn't it?" "That's between you and the state," I said. "But you might want to get a lawyer." I drove my car home while my wife followed in her vehicle, both of us silent for the entire trip. When we got to the house, she immediately started packing a bag. "Where are you going?" I asked. "To stay with my sister while I figure this out," she said, without looking at me. "I can't believe you're actually going through with pressing charges. I can't believe you expected me not to." She turned around with tears in her eyes. "They're my parents! Yes, what they did was wrong, but they're family. You could have gotten the car back and just moved on." "They told someone I was dead to sell my car," I said. "They committed fraud, theft, and probably a dozen other crimes. What happens next time they decide they know what's best for us? Do they sell the house, empty our bank accounts? Where does it end?" She didn't have an answer for that. The legal proceedings took about 3 months to work their way through the system. My in-laws hired a lawyer who tried to argue that this was a family dispute that had gotten out of hand, but the prosecutor wasn't buying it. Grand theft auto was grand theft auto, regardless of family relationships, and the false statements about my death made it clear this wasn't just a misunderstanding. They ended up taking a plea deal rather than risk going to trial. My mother-in-law got 6 months in county jail plus 2 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and a $10,000 fine. My father-in-law got a similar sentence. They also had to pay restitution for Jerry's losses and my legal expenses. More importantly, they now both have felony records that will follow them for the rest of their lives. My wife eventually came home, but our relationship was never the same. The whole experience had forced her to confront some uncomfortable truths about her parents that she'd been avoiding for years. She started therapy to work through the guilt and anger, and slowly began to understand why I couldn't just let it slide. About 6 months later, she made the decision to go no contact with her parents. It wasn't easy for her, but she realized that people who would commit felonies just to get their way weren't people she could trust to be in her life. As for me, I installed a concrete security bollard in my garage floor that can only be removed with special equipment. I also upgraded my security system and made sure the spare keys are in a safe that only my wife and I know the combination to. My car is back where it belongs, the in-laws are broke from legal fees and can't get decent jobs with their new criminal records, and for the first time in 5 years, my house is finally quiet. Sometimes people ask me if I feel bad about what happened to my in-laws, if I think the punishment was too harsh for what they did. The answer is simple. They didn't just steal my car. They stole 4 years of my work, violated my trust, and thought they could get away with it because we were family. Family doesn't give you the right to commit felonies. And if you're going to steal from someone, you'd better make sure they're not the type of person who values justice more than keeping the peace. The best part? Every time I start up that Camaro and hear the engine roar to life, I'm reminded that some things are worth fighting for, even if it means fighting your own family to protect them. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I used to work in an office in a training department. My manager was super chill and she didn't care much about my schedule and hours I was doing, as long as I did the hours my contract said and didn't take a mick. I used to come in at around 7:30 a.m. every day. I didn't start until 8 a.m., but I would come in, say hello to a few people, make myself a cup of tea, maybe have a quick chat with someone. I would then start working at around 7:50 a.m., still 10 minutes before my start time. I should finish work at 4:30 p.m., but quite often I would stay until 4:45 p.m. or sometimes go home at 4 p.m., but following day I would stay longer, so my hours in a working week would still add to what they supposed to. My awesome manager went on maternity leave, and they gave us some a-hole wannabe manager who hasn't had a clue about us or our job. Since my manager was away, we all had to report to the AH. She hated us. For some weird reason, she hated our department and everyone in it. Never said why, though. Very quickly, she realized I was doing weird hours and pulled me in the office. She started saying all this crap on how I'm stealing company's time and money, how I'm unprofessional, and how she is going to put her foot down and make me work properly, and whatever that means. I tired to listen to her and asked her questions, but she started to say that one more word and you are out. Okay, Cool. You are a prick. Great. So I ask, what is it that you want me to do? And she says, do the hours that are stated in your contract. Okay, cool. So, to clarify, I ask, does that mean I have to start at 8 a.m. and finish at 4:30 p.m. every day? She rolled her eyes, looks at me like I'm stupid, and says, it's not that hard. Your contracted hours is what I want to see on your timesheet, not this nonsense you've been doing. Okay, fine. See, I'm petty, very petty, and I don't like AHs. So I go home and sleep like a baby, knowing I will mess her up so much she will start losing her mind. Next day I come to work and wait by the clock-in machine to clock in bang on 8 a.m. Then I work my normal day, and then I go back to the clock-in machine and wait to clock out exactly at 4:30 p.m. I'm sure you already know where this is going. But wait! There is more. My super friendly fellow coworkers realized very quickly what I was doing and decided to do the same. There was 10 of us in a team, and we all gathered at the clock machine before and after the shift to clock in and out exactly at 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. The AH manager didn't realize for a while what was going on, until she put a meeting in place at 4 p.m. Well, 4 of us were in that meeting. Comes 4:25 p.m. and all 4 of us get up while she's talking and run out to our desks. We quickly gather our stuff and run to the clock-in machine. Then 2 minutes later, we all clock out and go home. She didn't even have the time to ask what we were doing. Next day, she sends us an invite for 4:30 p.m. and it gets rejected by everyone on my team. She sends nasty email to all of us who rejected that we will be written up for insubordination. We forward the email to HR and ask for a meeting. Meeting happens, the HR lady listens to us, eyes wide open, then laughs, shakes her head and says, leave it with me. We go about our day, then all clock out at exactly 4:30 p.m. Next day, AH manager is nowhere to be seen. HR lady send email to us asking to come see her at 2 p.m. There we are informed that AH manager will no longer oversee our department. Actually, she will no longer work for the company due to objectives not aligning anymore with the business. Whatever that means. Gossip has it that AH manager was always biting more than she could chew and caused issues across few departments. She was moved around because eckin' chances. Well, we went back to our own schedules. When our manager came back from maternity leave and was told what happened, she laughed and said she raised us well. The next one is an entitled people story, so this had been a difficult time for the family, mentally, even though now it is a joke that we use to tease my mom. This was around 15 years ago. We had moved to a new housing complex. This was a newly constructed space and families had just started to move in. There was this family of 3 consisting of 22M and his parents who moved in few months later. It started off as a friendly neighbor vibes. I used to get along with the son and his parents, and mine used to get along. Now it turned out that the son was the only decent human being in this family. He got married and went abroad within 3 years of moving here. I guess that's enough of a backstory and I will jump into the meat of it. All the below-mentioned events happened across a time span of 10 years. The lady in this family was the most entitled person I have seen, and she thought that my mom was here to just serve her family. I think my mom also went along as the lady was one of the few friends that she had here. My mom is a homemaker, and so she didn't have any friends outside the housing complex. It started with she coming to our house around the time lunch was being prepared. She would start by telling how weak she is to do any household work and she will have to go back and prepare food for her family in this weakened state. Hearing to her sobbing story, my mom used to give lunch to her. This used to happen maybe once every 2 weeks, which evolved into thrice-a-week occurrence as time went by. This then evolved into she ordering food from her home, and my mom used to take it to her home. Whenever they went to their hometown and came back, my mom used to offer food for one time, as they do not have to cook right afterwards. This voluntary offers evolved into expectations and then ordering around as well. As time went by, she used to call my mom a couple of days before they would be coming back from a travel to order food to be prepared for her family. My dad, me and my sis, we knew what kind of human being she is, but for some reason my mom couldn't see that aspect of her. She used to be pushed around by this lady as her personal staff. This led to many fights within us and my mom. However, things went back to how it was and never improved. My dad used to get a free bottle of whiskey every 3 months from a friend of his who was in the military. When this lady learned about this, she said to my mom to ask my dad to give her husband few whiskey bottles as well. Again, my mom thought there was nothing wrong in this ask. Now, this was not a poor family. Both son and dad in this family were earning good. In fact, at this time, only my dad was earning in our family. We used to have some difficult times, but most of the time, we were comfortable with the basic needs being met. Speaking about difficult times, one time my dad was falling short for my engineering college fees. My mom suggested to ask this family for a loan. When my dad asked them, they said that he can loan the amount for a day and would need it back after that. My dad declined this, and luckily he got a temporary reprieve from a relative, which he paid back in a month. All this after everything that they took from us. The silver lining was that this event started to cure my mom's blindness towards their behavior. She also came to know from various sources that the lady was bad-mouthing my mom's cooking to everyone. She also had the audacity to do it once in front of my mom, making her feel embarrassed. This added to the recovery process. The final nail came when my mom and sis had to travel to our hometown, leaving me and my dad for a few weeks. My mom expected that the lady would return favor by giving us food. It turned out she ghosted us for the entirety of the time my mom was away. If she saw us anywhere, she would turn around, making it look like she never saw us. This cured my mom completely. Mom realized that she had been just enabling this lady and her entitlement. She confronted the lady with all these things, and then set up boundaries. She never ever gave them any meal or help of any kind. The other family permanently moved to their hometown few years back, and the last we heard, the lady and her brother got into a big fight, and he barricaded the only way between their houses. Even her own family doesn't like having her around, it seems. Anyway, thank you for watching.